will. Okay, councillors, we're now testing again for audio and visual. Before we go live, testing 1, 2, 3. Okay, thank you, councillors. Welcome. I'd like to declare the ordinary meeting for June, an early meeting in June, open, and thank you all very much for your attendance. In opening this meeting, councillors, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land on which we meet, being the Wiradjuri people, and pay my respects to their elders, both past, present, and emerging. Councillors, as you know, this meeting is being recorded and is going live online, and as such, your presence here means you will be recorded as part of those proceedings this evening. Apologies for non-attendance. We have no apologies. We do have Councillor Ewan, who is absent but has had a previous apology accepted by this council. Disclosures of interest. Mr. GM, do we have any disclosures of interest for the business here this evening?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, we've got one disclosure as of right now, and it's from yourself, Mayor Councillor Scott Ferguson. The report is proposed road naming Glenori Road, which is item 8, proposed road name 61 Forest Reefs Road / Glenori Road, Millthorpe Subdivision. The reason for the interest is previously declared conflict in this development application as I undertake contracting in the building industry with the proponent. It's a pecuniary interest, so you'll lead through.
Thank you. No further disclosures of interest, councillors. We have no public forum this evening. I have no mayoral minute. Now I'll ask you to turn your attention to the minutes of the ordinary council meeting held on the 16th of the 5th, confirmation of those minutes. Do I have a mover that is a true record? Councillor Goswich has moved that way. Councillor Price-Jones has seconded that. I'll put the motion. All in favour? Aye. Against? Declared carried. Councillors, any matters arising from these minutes? Thank you. Councillor Reynolds.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The Blayney bullet, well, I'm going to call it the Blayney bullet. It was the old Bathurst bullet. It got a lot of media attention.
It's got a nice ring to it, Councillor.
It does. We can rename it. Got a lot of media attention, both with yourself and myself, television, online and print, and even with community groups. I was approached by both Bathurst and Orange community groups with regard to the rail action about extending services, and even the suggestion was to go to parks, so to send it to Dubbo and or parks. So it's still a work in progress, and I believe that the letter was sent off and a response from the local member who was forwarding it through to the Regional Transport Minister, I think, and with media coverage as well, they approached the Regional Transport Minister, who said that she was actually giving it due consideration. So hopefully, fingers crossed, something will eventuate, but if you don't ask, you'll never know. So, yeah, as in fingers crossed that something does develop. It may take a couple of years, but at least it's in progress. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Reynolds. It certainly has created a little bit of interest, and I thank you for doing that bit of media for me on that day. Councillors, any further questions or comments in regards to the minutes of the previous meeting? If not, we'll move through to page 11, item 2, questions taken on notice at the previous council meeting. There's a recommendation there. Do I have a mover for this recommendation? Thank you. Councillor Somerville has moved that way. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Newstead has seconded that. Councillor Somerville.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, I don't want to take too much time on this one, but the explanation did prick my interest as to just how we go about adjusting the cross subsidy, which is an additional amount on the sewer bill. I think the explanation that the plan provides for charges to be adjusted annually based on the CPI, I don't think that applies to the the cross-subsidy charge on individual typical residential bills. The quote from the plan, which is in the response there, starting, the plan provides that developer charges relating to the DSP will be reviewed after a period of 4 to 8 years. In the period between any review, charges will be adjusted annually. In fact, what the DSP says is that developer charges will be adjusted annually. So that the text that's quoted there left out the word developer charges. So based on that, I don't know that the adjustment by CPI does apply to the amount of the cross-subsidy on the bills. I then went and had a look at the developer servicing plan to see what it says about adjusting the cross-subsidy every year, because to the extent that we end up creating more lots than the developer plan forecast, and it forecasts an extra 7 a year out for the next 20 odd years. Now, we know that with all the subdivisions coming along, we're likely to have more than 7 blocks created every year, certainly in the next 3 or 4 years. And so the developer charges are going to sort of fall behind what's really required as a developer contribution. I then went and had a look at the the calculation of the cross-subsidy, and it seems to me, based on, and you can take this on notice, please, based on Table 6, the DSP provides for the cross-subsidy to be $55 every year through to 2048. So I don't know that we, in fact, do have any discretion to increase the amount of the subsidy, which means that to the extent that we create more lots than the plan suggested, we're going to fall behind, or we're going to have more and more of a cross-subsidy which is not collected from individual existing connections. So to summarise all that, please take this on notice. I suspect that it may be that we are tied not to increasing the amount of the cross-subsidy on individual sewer bills.
Without completely redoing the plan. And there was a lot of work done in that to get to this point as well. But good points made. Thank you, Councillor Somerville. I'm sure you'll take it on notice. Thank you. Councillors, any further questions or comments in regards to Councillor Somerville's questions that were taken on notice and now reported back to Council? If not, we have a mover, we have a seconder. I'll put the motion. All in favour?
Aye.
Declared carried. Councillors, now move through to page 13. Item 3, Tourism Development Program Application. There's a recommendation there of $1,100 to the Millthorpe Village Committee Night Market event. Do I have a mover? That way. Thank you, Councillor Reynolds. And seconder, Councillor Price-Jones. Councillors, questions or comments in regards to this? Councillor Goswich.
Thank you, Mayor. I'd just like to know whether the Millthorpe Village Committee has had more than 2 submissions this year. I'm sure we gave some to Millfest, the Garden Ramble, and this is the Firefest. So that would make it 3. And I'm not quite sure if that's right. I'm just saying they're things that stick in my head. I'm just wondering, in the actual development program, they're only allowed to have 2 submissions a year. I'm just wondering whether we've exceeded that.
Okay, well, there's a question, Mr. Director.
Through Mr. Mayor, with regards to, firstly, in regards to the Millthorpe Garden Ramble, I'm of the understanding that they're not actually part of the Millthorpe Village Committee. So that wouldn't...
Subcommittee though, isn't it?
Sorry?
It's a subcommittee of the Millthorpe Village Committee.
Okay. I stand corrected then, being a subcommittee.
Yeah.
Okay, and then, yeah, with regards to the number of applications, I don't have the information. So I'd have to take would have to take the question on notice.
Just some clarity around the actual policy about how often.
The policy says 2 a year per entity.
And we're potentially looking at 3.
Potentially 3, yes.
Yep. Okay, well, I'm certainly happy to we'll take that point on notice as far as re-looking at the policy, but I'm more than happy to support what we have in front of us. Mr General Manager.
Mr Mayor, I'd also like to highlight to Council, so we are now at June 6th. There's no other applications. I doubt there's any coming in. It's at Council's discretion. We will look at that. It's Council's call though.
Okay, thank you, Dan. It's a good point. Thank you, Councillor Goswich. Councillor Reynolds.
Just as a question, and maybe we need to defer this decision until clarification, but did Millfest actually get, and I can't recall one way or the other, I know there was other assistance through the state government events program, but did we also provide extra funding? We may have, I can't remember. So, but should we potentially look to give it conditional approval as long as they haven't applied for 3? If they've applied for 3, then we don't give approval, or somehow write it like that.
Look, I think there's certainly plenty of commitment in the room to support this, what is a wonderful event and potentially a regional event. So, but it's a good point Councillor Goswich has raised in regards to the policy. I can't see, as the General Manager has said, the only reason we would limit the amount to a specific organisation would be that it would potentially stop other organisations from applying for that money at this time, and we'd like to share it around the Shire, but since we've only have 3 and a bit weeks left in this financial year, that money is available. I'm certainly happy to support it as is, with the note that we probably need to look at that policy, because it is unusual if that is the case, that we are actually supporting the one organisation 3 times in the one financial year. Councillor Price-Jones.
I was just wondering whether the matter could come back against the next meeting, which is still in this month. So policy is worded and how it runs, and then maybe bring it back to the next meeting, and then it will be within the year.
Yeah, well, that's right. I forgot we do have 2 meetings this month. So we'll have the mover. Would you be happy with that? Yep, okay. Seconder, being yourself, would be happy with that? Okay, so we might defer this until the meeting later in the month, and we can get some clarity around the policy. We certainly wouldn't want to breach our policy, but we'll look into that. But I think it's fair to say here this evening that we're extremely supportive of the night market and the event itself. We'll just make sure that we're not contravening our policy. Councillor Price-Jones.
While we're actually checking the policy, it might be nice just to get a list of the people. It's a bit hard to remember sometimes, a list of the money that has been sent out over the year, just as a bit of a refresher when we get that information. That'd be great.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Reynolds.
And just as a supplementary as well, in the OP for next financial year, is there further allocation, or is this it? This the final amount of money under this program and this policy? I don't know the answer.
You're saying if there's any excess funds for it to roll over?
I know, but more, is there another $10,000 next financial year, or is this the end of this particular program?
My understanding is, Mr General Manager?
Yeah, through you, Mr Mayor, my understanding is there is, but we'll confirm that for the next meeting as well.
Okay, it's been a very successful program, so let's look at it. Okay, so we are moving to defer that. Again, we have the mover and the seconder, Councillor Reynolds, Councillor Price-Jones, that we'll defer this item to later in the month. I'll put that, if there's no further discussion on that, I'll put the motion. All in favour?
Aye.
Against? Declared carried. Thank you. Page 15, item 4, 23-24 councillor and mayoral remuneration. There's recommendations there 1, 2 and 3. Do I have a mover for these recommendations? I'm happy to move that way. Councillor Price-Jones has seconded that. Council's questions or comments in regards to this? As we can see, the Remuneration Tribunal has been very busy. Actually came out to the Central West and we had meetings in regards to them, and the convention has been that Blayney Shire Council take up the maximum amount available. No other questions or comments? Councillor Reynolds.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Can I express my disappointment? And I'm not trying to be greedy or anything, but our cost of living is going up by about 6 to 7% a year, has for the last 2 years. As in last year's remuneration, I think only went up 2-point-something%. We are dropping dramatically behind. I know there's nothing we can do because the tribunal just sets the rate, but are they living on another planet? As in, do they not realise that the cost of living, supermarket groceries are going up, I think, at 9%. Fuel has gone up quite considerably and is being indexed, etc., and many other cost of living items are going up. So I'd just like to express my disappointment that at least when and even the wages of our council staff, it's proposed to increase the wages by 4.5% plus for many of the council staff, a bonus of $1,000 on top of that 4.5%. So and during COVID, there was 1 year where we didn't actually rise, even though there was inflation. So in staying in the same category, as opposed to one of our neighbours being Cabon that is going up into a new category, we are going backwards at a rapid rate, which with a council election coming up in just over 12 months' time, as in it's very hard to encourage councillors, and you don't do it just for remuneration, but we are just dropping further and further behind. Since I've been on council, I suspect we've probably dropped at least 10, probably 15% behind inflation in that time that I've been on council, which is, about 5.5, 6 years. So, and to also see that the Minister for Local Government come out and be quite critical of councils agreeing to a 3% increase, I think is quite disappointing as well. That, we as councillors, and I speak on, hopefully I speak on behalf of my fellow councillors here in this chamber, do a lot of behind the scenes work. We go to a lot of community events, support our community, as well as council events and activities throughout the year. So again, it's just very disappointing that the remuneration is not at least keeping pace with inflation, but again, there's nothing we can do to actually try and at least keep in pace with inflation, but hopefully next year we can put another submission in and say at least keep in pace with inflation. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Reynolds. Councillor Bryce-Jones.
Thanks, Mayor Ferguson. I would just like to add too that I agree that 3% is not representative of this, our current CPI or what's happening in the world. But I do, however, note that they're saying that they're going to hold a comprehensive, the Tribunal is going to hold a comprehensive review, and hopefully that might bring everything into the 21st century.
Yeah, look, thank you. And I guess we had the opportunity to meet the Tribunal with all the mayors of the JO and had a long conversation about the change in role of councillors and the Mayor particularly, and as Councillor Reynolds has touched on, and while it may not be appreciated generally by the community, the amount of extra time that is spent in this role has increased exponentially. But really the reason is to, and it's not the only reason of course, but we do need, and again Councillor Reynolds touched on it, it needs to this role needs to become more attractive for people to take up to become a councillor, and some small remuneration and the time and the sacrifice needs to be recognised. We do need new councillors. This is about the future. We've got to continue to grow, and of course this is just a small part of creating an environment where we can attract future councillors. Thank you. Any other questions or comments? If not, I'll put the motion. All in favour?
Aye.
Against? Declared carried. Councillors, page 19, item 5, minutes of the Audit, Risk and Improvement Committee meeting held on the 18th of May. Recommendations there 1, 2 and 3. Do I have a mover for these? Thank you. Councillor Somervale has moved that way. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Price-Jones has seconded that. Councillors, questions or comments? Councillor Somervale.
Yes, just a brief comment, Mr. Mayor. I'd just like to congratulate the Director on his report, which adds a lot of information, which is in addition to what you get from simply reading the minutes. So I think for those interested in what the Audit, Risk and Improvement Committee does, the report actually adds a lot of flesh to the minutes, which is really good. One important thing that came out of the Audit Committee meeting was a recommendation by the members of the Audit Committee that Council considers very early in the next financial year whether we need to apply for a special rate variation. The view in the Audit Committee is that if we're going to do that, we need to get the process underway and have it out of the way before the next council elections. The view on the committee was that it would not be appropriate for the first item for a new council to have to consider was whether we needed to go for a special rate variation and all the community consultation that's required in that. So one recommendation from the committee was let's get on with our financial sustainability review. Let's come to a landing with the benefit of advice from experts as to whether we do need a special rate variation, and if we do, let's get on with it early in the next financial year. That was one thing, and the second thing worth mentioning is, which the committee discussed, was alerting councillors to the fact that we need to change the composition of our audit committee before the 1st of July next year. OLG's already produced guidelines. They're waiting on the government to actually promulgate the regulation effect of the guidelines, but they're ready to go. And the main changes in terms of the composition of the committee is that it will move from 2 independent members to 3 independent members, and there will no longer be a full voting councillor member on the committee. Councils have the option of appointing a councillor to the committee in a non-voting capacity, but the councillor who is appointed to the committee has to satisfy the eligibility criteria which are set out in the guidelines, which is financially literate and relevant skills to perform the tasks of an audit committee member. So we've got changes coming, and we need to be ready for them because they'll be in place 1st July next year.
It's quite a change, Councillor Somerville, isn't it, to actually guideline the elected representation from a voting role on that audit committee is quite a substantial disconnect.
And the sort of policy behind it seems to be to have this independent audit committee exercising a lot of scrutiny over what councils do, because there's another provision in the guidelines that says no individual councillor is entitled to request information from the audit committee. If councillors or any individual councillor wants some information from the audit committee, it has to come via a resolution of the council. So that sends a bit of a message that what the government's trying to do is establish this independent body which can have a non-voting councillor on it, but basically with a role to scrutinise how council.
Okay, very interesting. Thank you for that update, Councillor Somerville. We'll need to certainly keep an eye on that. Councillor Reynolds.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I, on the other hand, have a few issues with the report. I've had a look at what the Audit Risk and Improvement Committee is supposed to do. It's supposed to be a special committee of council that acts as an advisory body currently, as opposed to the proposed changes, to council, and has no executive powers except those expressly provided by council. The purpose of the committee is to provide independent assurance and assistance to council in effectively discharge of its responsibilities for financial reporting, risk management, internal controls, governance, and internal and external audit. When I read the report, and I'll use one example regarding the cybersecurity review, the penetration test, as in we're responsible as councillors, not ARIC, and I've not seen the penetration test. I've actually gone and had a look at it on our portal, but personally, as in I believe that should come as a report to council, as in as a confidential report, because there is confidential information in it. But we need to know as councillors if there are issues with our firewalls and our network. That's my belief. We did a cyber security workshop a week and a bit ago, and I think we should have actually been discussing this rather than what was presented at that cyber security workshop. So I again, and I'm requesting that a report come up to the next council meeting with regard to the penetration test to actually see, as in whether our systems are adequate. Yes, it can go to ARIC, but we, as in ARIC, should be coming back with a report and saying, these are the issues with your, as in penetration test, and being put before council. So that's one issue that I'm concerned about, that we should, as councillors, be aware of what any issues there are, because it's our responsibility as councillors and not ARIC. And if the, as the expression goes, shit hits the fan, we're potentially liable, not ARIC. So I'd like to see a report come to the next council meeting on the penetration test, as I said, in confidential, because there's a lot of information in there that shouldn't be made public. That there was also, with regard to outstanding audit issues, as in, again, nothing in this report that actually tells me what the outstanding audit issues are. As a councillor, I like to know where we're failing, or where there are issues that we still need to actually undertake. We also, I believe there was again with the audit office, I'd like to know if there were issues raised with that as a councillor. So again, knowing what is on the table, what major concerns may be highlighted and flagged. There may be none, I don't know. But as a councillor, I believe I need to know, as in what issues are there. And again, it may well be in closed council, it may not be. But there are a number of issues within that have gone to ARIC, but no information has come back to council. And that really concerns me as a councillor, that we're, as in, either information is being withheld or just not being provided to the councillors to actually adequately understand where we're sitting, what our issues are, whether it is with the penetration test or with the auditors and with the outstanding issues. So I'd like some reports to come back to council at the next council meeting to actually highlight what these issues are and whether we should have concerns or not about those issues. So, as in, while I'll support the report tonight, I was thinking of actually asking for a deferral, but I would like those three reports to come back to the next council meeting, Mr Mayor.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Reynolds, for those points, and we'll need to take that.
Mr Mayor, we'll just take that on notice, but I will just clarify, no information is being withheld from council.
Yeah, no. Now, whether the process is a bit clunky and we're not getting the information, but that'd be the only reason. There wouldn't be any deliberate attempt, I'm sure, to actually hide or restrict access information from councillors. But take your concerns on board, Councillor Reynolds, thank you, and I'm sure we can get the information. Okay, councillors, still in regards conversations around the audit, risk and improvement, Councillor Price-Jones.
Question.
Yep.
So the minutes were February 2023, and it's now June. So I was just wondering about what's the length of time before they come to council, and why is it?
Through you, Councillor Price-Jones, I'd say that's caught up in the acknowledgement of the previous meeting when ARIC. That would have been the one before. So this is the 18th of May, which would reference the previous one for that committee.
Thank you.
Yeah, that is confirming its previous.
Yeah, okay, all right.
Okay, thank you. Okay, councillors, any further questions, comments? We have a mover, we have a seconder. I'll put the motion. All in favour? Against? Declared carried. Move now through to page 24. Item 6, the Infrastructure Services Monthly Report. There's a recommendation there to receive and note this report. Do I have a mover? Thank you. Councillor Goswich has moved that way. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Price-Jones has seconded that. Councillors, questions or comments in regards to all the things that have been happening around our shire in the last month? Councillor Price-Jones.
Just have a quick question around the supply of quarry materials. So we have our own quarries, but we obviously have to source things from other quarries as well. Is that?
Mr Director, a question about sourcing other products from other quarries?
Through you, Mr Mayor, yes, so we can only manufacture certain products. Typically those aren't suitable for under sealed roads, so we purchase materials from other quarries.
Thank you, Mr Director. Councillor Newstead.
Yeah, thank you, Mr Mayor. Just a quick comment more than anything. I see here that the painting of the toilets and the canteen at King George Oval is taking place, or nearly finished. Would it be possible, and I've asked this question before, but I'll ask it in meeting, that the new toilet blocks, if there's money left over or if we can get some more grant funding, that the new toilet or the dressing sheds could be painted the same green? Because at the moment they're just a concrete block grey, and it just seems a bit weird to have everything nicely painted back to the original green, and they're just sitting there. Yeah, tied all together. It might not happen for a while, but I just thought I'd put that out there.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Newstead. Councillor Reynolds, your question, comment?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. The first one is actually a congratulations. I did have a note here to ask if the speed limit on Forest Reef Road could be raised in the new section from 40 back to 80, given that it looks as though it will be a fair while to put the line markings in, and coming in tonight I see it had already been done. So thank you through to the Director and the staff that what I was proposing to ask tonight has already been done on that one. I have two other issues, and so they're in relation to the Director but not in the report. So I want the Director to take both of these on notice. I'm sure that hopefully he can take them on notice. The first one is with the forecast of dry weather, potentially drier than average winter and potentially spring, as in though your crystal ball may be better than mine or worse than mine. But firstly with the bores across the Shire, to just make sure that all the bores are ready, operational. Are there any issues? And I know in the past we've had issues with keys, etc., but as in where is everything standing? But also to highlight to the community what our policy is with regard to usage from the bores. So that's one of the hopes, and maybe a report can come back to council or a comment within the Director's report for the next council meeting or the one after that. But for if there is a drier than normal time, because for the last 3 years I suspect bore water usage has been very, very low across the Shire, and we do have a reasonable number of bores available, but we the policy at the in the previous council because of some misuse or overuse of bores. So that's one report. Or the second one is probably a little bit more serious, and it was something that the previous council again requested, and I think there was an MOU written, and Councillor Somervale may be able to update me, but this is with regard to the Barry Bore and the Barry Water Scheme. Now, at the time, Council had concerns about potential liability in providing that water. There was supposed to be, as far as I understood, an audit undertaken, and that was supposed to be, I think at least 12 months ago, the report was supposed to come back to council, and I've seen nothing on that. So I was just wondering if the Director could follow up on what is actually happening with the Barry Bore, because again, there may be pressure arising as if conditions turn dry again and demand increases. But I believe a lot of the concern was about drinking use of that water. And I know at the time, both I think yourself, Mr Mayor, and the Deputy Mayor or Councillor Somervale had meetings with the community. So I'd like an update, but also to try and reduce potential liability moving forward if there is an issue with the quality of the water moving forward. So again, take it on notice, and I'm not expecting it in June, but sometime in August or September, if we could actually get a report back on where the Barry Bore situation and the private water scheme is at, and how, from a liability point of view, we can reduce our liability as much as possible moving forward. So they're the two, both about water, Mr Mayor. that I would like to see reports come back to council in the future, particularly the second one, to try and protect council from any matters that may arise, particularly if it becomes drier. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Reynolds. There's certainly a lot of work done out there. That was probably 3 years ago now. I think it's a good idea to actually go back and refresh about where we landed on that. I know there was an audit of some description, but it was 3 years ago, so it'll be worth revisiting that and just making sure everything out there is okay. Right, councillors, we still have the infrastructure report in front of us. Any further question? Councillor Price-Jones.
Just a question, thank you. Just under the Smart Hub lighting and access control, it talks about the lighting and it sort of talks about the final programming software still outstanding, but it's tied to the same control system for the recycled water treatment plant. Is that different to the one that's provisioning the recycled water plant, or is it the same person? Because I see down below it says here that the commissioning and validation of two different things.
Mr Director.
Through you, Mr Mayor. The commissioning related to ensuring that the water being produced was at a certain standard, and there was one consultant completing that work, and that relates to more scientific chemistry testing. The item you just raised in terms of the back-end control system is a software consultant whom is integrating all this access control, lighting and the recycled water treatment plant control system into an online platform that we can manage.
Is that a concern for getting this off the ground? I didn't realise it kind of covered off on all of these other places as well. I didn't realise it was as global.
It's taken much longer than anticipated. We held I guess we're in the final steps of the completion. We held a meeting mid last week with the consultant. There were 6 items outstanding. They've started to resolve some of them. In addition, there was a faulty physical controller that we've had to dismount out of the system because it wasn't accepting its programming. Sent it back to Sydney to get swapped over with one that that's reprogrammed.
So do we have a date?
Thank you, Mr Director. Thank you, Councillor Price-Jones. Councillor Somerville.
Yes, thanks, Mr Mayor. Whilst we're on the recycled water treatment plant, just one issue which occurred to me when I was reading this. Not only is the time horizon blown out enormously for this project, but so have the costs. I think at our last CapEx review, current total cost is something like 723,000 against our original budget of 530 odd thousand, 35% increase. The government recently announced as part of the legislation to privatise or to stop the privatisation of Sydney Water and Hunter Water that they were going to have a investigation of local water utilities through regional New South Wales, which is good. And they were going to look at how they're operating and the governance issues associated with them and so on. And it occurs to me that when we set the tariff for recycled water, which the general fund pays the sewer fund, that was set on the basis of a return on investment to the sewer fund based on a capital cost which was less than the actual capital cost is now going to be. So I suspect we need to review the tariff charged by the general fund by the sewer fund to the general fund for recycled water to make sure that there's a reasonable return on investment in the recycled water treatment plant, because as we know, that's all been funded out of reserves in the sewer fund. My suggestion is that maybe the best way of dealing with that is to make sure that the consultant looking at the sewer business plan also looks at an appropriate level of recovery for its investment in the recycled water treatment plant. And that may be the best way of satisfying ourselves that we're doing the right thing by the sewer fund.
Good point. Thank you, Councillor Somerville. Okay, councillors, still on the Infrastructure Services Monthly Report. No further questions or comments? We have a mover, we have a seconder. I'll put the motion. All in favour?
Aye.
Against? Declared carried. Move now through to page 29, item 7, proposed name, addition to be pre-approved road and bridge name list. Recommendations there 1, 2 and 3. Councillors, do I have a mover for these recommendations? Thank you. Councillor Price-Jones has moved that way. Do I have a seconder? Thank you. Councillor Newstead. Councillors, any questions or comments in regards to this item? We'll go out to public exhibition. Everyone happy? We have a mover, seconder. I'll put the motion. All in favour?
Aye.
Against? Declared carried. Actually, interest in reading some of those newspaper clippings. Councillors, we now go through to item 8. I've declared an interest in this item. I'd like to invite the Deputy Mayor to come up and chair this item. Thank you.
Thank you, councillors. We now, the Mayor having left the room, we now move to item 8, proposed road name at 61 Forest Reach Road subdivision. We have a recommendation there. Does someone like to move the recommendation? Councillor Newstead, seconded. Councillor Goswich, thank you. Do we have any questions or comments in relation to this item? Yes, Councillor Reynolds.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Mayor. I'm very concerned this is going to open up wounds. It's going to create division in the community. I've read the proposal for to use the name Mortimer. I'd be very happy if it was put into the list, like was suggested with the previous name, and potentially used for another road down the track. But personally, I've seen what this subdivision and the name has done with the community. It's very divisive, and personally I prefer not to progress, and I will be voting that way against actually moving to put this out in public exhibition. But again, it's a personal concern about opening up wounds, and it's a very raw subject to many in the community. There is still a lot of angst amongst some, and the use of the name Mortimer, or Mortimer Close in this case, for this particular subdivision, or proposed as in the subdivision where construction of the road is currently underway, I really have grave concerns about. And with our policy, it does state that you try and not create animosity or anger in the community. So I'm looking at trying to head it off by just saying no to this. So that's how I will be intending to vote tonight, Mr. Mayor, Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Reynolds. Any further? Yes, Councillor Price-Jones.
I just had a question around the resolution of the prior council. Sorry. I just had a question around the resolution from the prior council around, so they originally asked for the road to be named Mortimer Close at that time in their original DA, was it? And then it was removed in that consideration, and it's taken, I guess, nearly 2 years for them to come back with this. So assumedly they knew that Mr. Mortimer, Ian Charles Mortimer would possibly be approved on the policy for the rigid naming policy. But, so I just don't understand the length of time and why it's now all of a sudden come up again, and why it was taken off originally.
Yeah, well, I think I was on council at the time. I know Councillor Newstead had a particular view about this as well. The original application to approve the subdivision included a recommendation that the name, I think it was Mortimer Close then probably, be adopted at that time. The actual subdivision application itself was fairly controversial, and I think councillors at the time took the view that the question of what the road ought to be named should be simply deferred, taken off the table at the time, so it didn't confuse the issue. So that's why it was deferred. As you can see, it was July 21, almost 2 years ago, that was considered, so I don't understand why it's taken so long, frankly, but anyway. Yes, Councillor Newstead.
Thank you, Mr Deputy Mayor. The question here is whether it should be out on exhibition for 28 days. I think that's the fair way to go. See what submissions we get back, and then go from there. I'll be voting for this to go through.
Thank you. Any other questions from councillors? Any other comments from councillors? If not, I will put that. Those in favour? Aye. Those against? I declare that carried. We'll now get the Mayor to return to the room.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Somervale. Councillors, now moving through to page 43, item 9, erection of a carport at 8 Russart Street, Lyndhurst. Recommendation there. Do I have a mover for this recommendation? Councillor Reynolds has moved that way. Councillor Newstead has seconded. Any questions, comments in regards to this item? Looks pretty straightforward, councillors. All good? Excellent. We've moved, we've seconded. I'll put the motion. All in favour?
Aye.
Against? Declared. Concludes the business that we have for consideration here this evening. Thank you for your attendance, and as such, I'd like to declare the meeting closed.